Every war has two battlefields, one where bombs fall and one where numbers rise. One costs lives, the other prints money. And the people who run the second one rarely lose sleep over the first. We talk about war in terms of politics, of ideology, of leadership failures and historical grievances. These are real, these matter. But underneath all of it, running quietly, like current beneath water, is something more structural. Something that doesn't appear in the headlines, but shows up reliably in quarterly earnings reports, commodity futures, and defense budget line items. War is also an economic event. And economic events have winners. That's not a conspiracy. That's accounting. When conflict begins, money moves. It doesn't disappear. It doesn't pause. It relocates, fast, and in predictable directions. When Iraq invaded Kuwait in 1990, oil prices nearly doubled within weeks. When Russia invaded Ukraine in 2022, European natural gas prices spiked over 400% within months. These aren't coincidences. They're patterns. Defense budgets expand. Oil markets tighten. Gold surges as investors flee uncertainty. Shipping insurance spikes because maritime routes near conflict zones become high-risk corridors. Currencies in unstable regions collapse, while safe haven currencies strengthen. Every one of these movements creates a loser somewhere, and every loser has a corresponding winner. Let's start with the industry most visibly positioned to benefit: defense. Lockheed Martin is the largest defense contractor in the world. In 2022, the year Russia invaded Ukraine, the company reported revenues of approximately $66 billion. Its stock rose over 35% that year, one of its strongest performances in recent history, while the broader market declined. Raytheon Technologies manufactures the Stinger and Javelin missiles that became critical tools in that same conflict. In the months following the invasion, Raytheon's CEO acknowledged the company was working to increase production capacity to meet surging demand, and expected long-term revenue tailwinds from the conflict. None of this is hidden. It's in their annual reports. Following 9/11, the U.S. defense budget sat at roughly $300 billion. By 2023, it had crossed $800 billion. The expansion was shaped by conflicts in Afghanistan and Iraq that lasted longer than any previous American war. When governments enter sustained conflict, procurement cycles accelerate, oversight loosens under urgency, and contractors enter long-term agreements that outlast the conflicts themselves. Wars end. Programs like these rarely do. Now move your attention to energy. The Strait of Hormuz, a narrow channel between Iran and Oman, handles approximately 20% of global oil trade every single day. It is not just a geographic fact. It is an economic pressure point. When conflict emerges near this corridor, the mechanics are immediate. Tanker operators raise rates. Insurance underwriters reassess risk premiums. Oil futures traders price in supply disruption before a single barrel is affected. The anticipation of scarcity moves markets faster than scarcity itself. During the Iran-Iraq War of the 1980s, oil tankers in the Gulf were being struck by missiles. The United States reflagged Kuwaiti tankers under the American flag to provide naval escort, a military operation driven, in significant part, by energy economics. Following the 2003 invasion of Iraq, American energy companies secured contracts in Iraqi oil fields that had been inaccessible under the prior government. Whether that outcome was a goal, a consequence, or simply an opportunity taken, the observable result was the same. Conflict reshaped access to one of the world's most valuable resources. Zoom out. Look at the level of nations. The United States is the world's largest arms exporter, accounting for roughly 40% of global arms transfers in recent years, according to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute. When tensions rise between countries, major powers don't just observe, they engage. And engagement, at the geopolitical level, almost always involves arms. This isn't desire for war, it's leverage. A nation under threat needs weapons, intelligence, and diplomatic cover. These come with strings: trade concessions,
basing rights, resource access agreements. The transaction is rarely explicit. It doesn't need to be. Influence flows toward those who supply security, and the suppliers are rarely neutral observers.
Below the formal economy of conflict, there is another economy entirely. It doesn't file tax returns, it doesn't appear in GDP figures, but it is among the most resilient economic structures in human history. When sanctions are imposed, they rarely eliminate trade, they reroute it. They make it more expensive, more dangerous, and vastly more profitable for those willing to operate in the margins. The Iraq Oil for Food program, a UN-sanctioned humanitarian mechanism, was later found to have been systematically corrupted. Kickbacks, inflated contracts, and illicit payments were documented across dozens of countries. It became one of the largest fraud cases in UN history. War creates scarcity. Scarcity creates price premiums. Price premiums attract risk-tolerant operators. The shadow economy doesn't emerge despite conflict, it emerges because of it. Instability is its operating environment. Here is where psychology enters. Because none of what we've described would work without a very predictable feature of human cognition. Fear accelerates decisions. When a population is frightened, it accepts trade-offs it would never accept in peacetime. Defense budgets expand without scrutiny. Procurement processes compressed from years into months. Contracts signed under urgency rather than competition. In the months following September 11th, the U.S. Congress passed the authorization for use of military force within 3 days. The Patriot Act passed within 6 weeks. An entirely new federal bureaucracy was established within a year, each creating permanent structures and permanent procurement relationships with private industry. Crisis doesn't just change policy, it builds institutions. And institutions, once built, find reasons to persist. The people who understand this, who position themselves near the window before it opens, tend to walk through it very comfortably. The goal here is not outrage. Outrage is easy, and it's usually useless. The goal is clarity. Because once you see the structure, once you understand that war is an economic shockwave with predictable beneficiaries, you start asking better questions. Not just who started this war, but who profits from it continuing. Not just what are the peace terms, but what do peace terms cost the people who benefit from the absence of peace? Wars end, but the systems built during them rarely do. The defense contractor that expanded during conflict doesn't downsize when peace arrives. It finds the next threat and ensures the policy window stays open. The shadow economy that emerges during sanctions doesn't dissolve. It evolves, professionalizes, and waits. And the budget line items that ballooned under urgency become the baseline for the next negotiation. This is not the story of evil men in dark rooms. It is the story of systems following their own logic, of incentives aligning, quietly and reliably, in the same direction they have always aligned. The battlefield you see is real. The one you don't see has been